let's start off with daylight savings time because it makes us all tired, and it's definitely something we all relate to, but I don't think we think about how legislation and how other planning can affect that and maybe simplify it for us.
Yeah, that's right. And, there's been various resolutions over the years in Columbus as well as at the federal level. I think the United States Senate actually got something out over the past 3 or 4 years, which I think most people died of shock because it was, A, they were legislating in that area, and B, they actually had a unanimous vote and got something done. Sorry to be so insulting on that, but
Yeah.
but I mean, but even then, still, here we go marching on with this. But I think the crux of the issue with daylight saving time.
That's right. There's no S.
There's no S.
Let's point that out right now. Okay.
It's hard.
Okay.
It's hard to get that squared away. But there's two things at play. One, obviously, the time change. The big precipitous fallback and then spring forward always throws people off. Used to be for me the spring forward was the big issue, but now with kids, even fallback gets screwed up. And then there's the issue regarding who wins out on if we did all daylight saving time or we just stayed at standard time. School folks want to stay at standard time. Their argument is, look, kids are waiting at the bus stop here and it's pitch black outside. That's not good. Whereas the business community would say, look, we can maximize our revenue if there's more daylight after work for people to go to sporting events, bars, you name it. And so there's that schism. But the nice part about it is I think all parties agree that the big, leaps in time are the biggest problem, that there's agreement that those need to go away. And so I've heard all sorts of proposals, again, either stay on daylight saving time or just standard time or split the difference half hour one way. But if you look at sunrise and sunset times, it's kind of like this sine wave over time. They grow and they shrink, they grow and they shrink. What I'm proposing, and I have this resolution currently being drafted, and I'm calling it the Constant Sunrise Resolution. The idea would be that we urge Congress to adopt some sort of legislation that gets rid of those big changes in time and actually does a more continuous time change. So the idea being that 1 hour is a big jump. People see that, they feel it. But do you really feel just 2, 3, 4 minutes if you were to fall back that period of time? And the answer is probably not. So the idea would be that, every week you'd either fall back a couple minutes, you'd spring forward a couple minutes, and you wouldn't notice it because most people use their cell phones as their alarm. When they look at clocks, they're typically, like their cable box or their computer, something that is connected to the internet. And all of those are synced up to a network time server. So that network time server could be working behind the scenes to say, hey, do this time adjustment here, do this time adjustment there, which is the way it happens for a lot of people now, whether, we're falling back or springing forward. Most people wake up in the morning, they're like, my cell phone, it picked that up. And, the first time that you really notice it is when you go out to your car, which obviously hasn't changed, and you got to change it
Which
there.
I still haven't fixed yet, yes. Yes.
Well, there have been years that I have just been like, it's a few months, I'll wait this one out
Yes,
until
exactly.
it goes back, because I use, you use your cell and your computer. And so since most people use some sort of internet-connected electronics for their alarms, they wouldn't notice it, and not being that big jump, they would just continue on with this and not have to deal with the fallout for that. Moreover, you would be able to pick a time that we want the sunrise to be at. So let's say the sunrise should be at 7 a.m. and that through this process, if this were enacted, it would be constant the year round. Sunrise would always be at 7 a.m. So kids going out to the bus stop would have sunlight irrespective of what time of the year it is. So I think that's good. Now, on the sunset side, that's where things, move a little more greatly because of something like this. But again, you're avoiding the jumps. You're doing the one thing that I think keeps, kids waiting for the bus stop intact. I think it's a great solution. It's innovative in this sense. And again, it's something that I hope we can at least consider in Columbus and maybe pass it out to say, look, Congress, if you really want something that's dispositive of this issue, I think this is a good approach.
I think one of the questions might be why? Why do we need to spend time looking at this? But there are actual expenses, besides the fact that we all know that when time changes, our pets still think they should be fed at certain times. And as you pointed out earlier, our kids still think they should be fed at certain times, even if we think it is still sleeping time. So we know that definitely messes with people's rhythms. But teachers have talked about what their students are like the week that the time changes. There's been studies, I think, on what happens with productivity in the business world the week after time happens, and it does really cost money.
That's absolutely right. And, I would say, just having this behind the scenes makes it a lot easier. And again, you mentioned the old analog clock, and, I have obviously in my cars like that, but then again, it's a 2012. I would imagine some of the newer cars probably are connected in some way to, GPS or whatnot that automatically changes the time. So, for those people that do use analog clocks, you're talking about 5 minutes a week. And that is at like the points of the year where, days are getting shorter or longer at their most rapid pace, which are like in between the solstices. So I would think, March and September when they're really starting to take off one way or another. So it's really not a great, deal of, hardship for people to go through something like that. And then as soon as you do realize it, you change it. But I mean, for me, some of those analog devices like the microwave, which first thing, wake up in the morning, there's the microwave, heat up some old coffee and away we go. But a lot of times if there's been a power spike or sag or something like that, or a power outage, you have to reset that anyway. And what are you going to set that to? Typically it's your cell phone or a computer or something to that effect. So I think this is a novel approach to that. And my bias obviously is towards, the schools getting to work okay in the morning. Because as you pointed out, when you have that time change, particularly spring forward, there are plenty of studies that show accidents go up, productivity goes down, people are just out of sync. And I think we can do away with that.
And I hadn't really thought about the accident component, but yeah, it's straight up dangerous when people aren't operating with all of their awakeness. That's probably not the best way to say that, but and this is a time of day when kids are not just waiting for buses, but walking to school, biking to school, and fighting traffic and all of that happening. So locking sunrise at 7 means the adjustments always happen on the other end.
Correct.
And we can be a little more flexible on the other end.
Yeah.
There's not so much a huge, massive kids trying to get to one place outside at the same time at the other end at the same time. So.
Right. What's interesting about it, if you ever look at a graph of sunrise and sunsets, because everybody looks at graphs of sunrises and sunsets.
I kind of love them, but yes.
You can see the effect of current daylight saving time where they're basically doing exactly what I'm suggesting, only with a bigger chunk of time. So that 1 hour big step.
Yeah.
So with respect to the sunrise doing its thing like this, I think it's like that. It shifts the peak up. That's all it really does. This, instead of having, that big, discontinuity, it's much more flat.
So if we're looking like this is a completely unheard of thing, it's actually exactly what daylight saving time does already. It just does it once in a big chunk or twice.
Exactly. More frequent with smaller, I would argue, imperceptible time changes.
Yeah, I like that. And it's interesting to me because I know there's already, it's not something I would have thought of looking at on the state level. But I can see it would be helpful for schools, it would be helpful for businesses, it would be helpful just within our households so that our kids aren't trying to wake us up at 5 a.m. thinking it's breakfast time. Oh my goodness. But there is precedent for states saying, nope, we're doing something different. This is
Arizona.
crazy. Yeah. And
right.
small parts of states even. Isn't there a section of Indiana that does its own?
I think you're right about that,
I'll have
yes.
to look that up. Don't quote me on that. But so there is a precedent for doing it that way. And it's a neat way to be able to say, we can make a decision to do this and maybe become an example for other parts of the country and saying, hey, it worked in Ohio. Let's try this out. So,
Yes, I certainly hope
Yeah.
so, and I would be remiss if I didn't point out this does nothing with respect to time zones. That part is still very much important.
Yeah, we can't change those at the state level. Those are going to stay where they are.
Yes, and for good reason.
And yes, those are okay. But yeah, I think that is a really interesting solution, and I like the graphs behind it. I like the thoughts, the imperceptible nature of it. I think we're just close enough to a time change that some of us might still be catching up. Our clocks are still catching up anyway, most of us.
My car's is, at least.
Yeah, I've lost power enough times that my microwave is probably fixed by now, but the car,